good evening. This is the November 12th monthly meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. It is now called to order. My name is Mimi Love, and I'd like to thank the commissioners for donating their time, sharing their valuable insights, and shaping the city of Boston into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all of its citizens. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Please note that the audio recording of this meeting will be made available to the public. I am going to ask all of the commissioners to say present as I call your name. Amy Chambers. All right. Ex officio Amy Chambers may not be with us just yet. Linda Easley.
Yes.
Jonathan Evans.
Present.
Diana Fernandez.
Present.
Shauna Gillis-Smith.
Present.
David Hassin.
Present.
Mick Young Kim.
Present.
Anne Marie Lubenow.
Present.
I don't think Commissioner Manfredi or Commissioner Morris or Commissioner Kathy Koderitas are with us tonight. Bill Ron.
Present.
Laura Solano.
Present.
Kirk Sykes.
Present.
And myself, Mimi Love, present. Terrific. Moving on to the approval of the meeting minutes. Can I get
Commissioner Love, could I just add one amendment on the October 10th meeting? The Dana-Farber Beth Israel Deaconess Project, it should probably be noted that that my testimony was read into the record of that evening.
And I think that would be the October 22nd design
Oh,
committee.
sorry.
No,
October 10th.
October 8th, the monthly meeting.
Oh, sorry, October 8th, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that correction, Ashana. And so with that, can I have a motion to approve the October 8th monthly meeting minutes, the monthly meeting minutes for the design committee session A that happened on October 22nd, and also design subcommittee session B that happened on the 22nd.
Motion to approve.
And second?
Second.
And with that, I'm going to call on everyone. Linda Easley,
Yes.
Jonathan Evans,
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith,
Yes.
David Hassin,
Yes.
Mick Young Kim,
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Yes.
Bill Ron,
Yes.
Laura Solano,
Yes.
Kirk Sykes,
Yes.
and myself, Mimi Love. So the meeting minutes are approved. Before we get to our regular business, it's my pleasure to introduce the City of Boston's Chief of Planning, Cairo Shen. He will be familiar to a lot of you on the call as he played a significant role in shaping the City of Boston's planning initiatives, specifically for the years 1993 through 2015. He has worked under the guidance of Mayor Menino and Mayor Walsh, and we're happy to have him back under Mayor Wu's leadership as the Chief of City Planning. Just a side note to say he was the Executive Director of MIT Center for Real Estate from 2020 to 2024, and has contributed time the last 2 years to be on the Article 80 Modernization Steering Committee. And with that, I will ask Cairo Shen to say a few words.
Thank you, Mimi. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to say hello and to introduce myself to the general audience tonight. I'm delighted to have been asked by the mayor to step into this very important position as Chief of Planning. I started actually about a month ago, and I'm here primarily to just not only to reintroduce myself to many of the commissioners, but to also make sure that everybody knows that the Boston Civic Design Commission remains one of the most important commission that actually participates and advises us in the development review and design review Article 80 procedure. So I anticipate that the commission will be engaged in many of the efforts that we as a planning department have been embarking on. I would say that from my perspective, we are well staffed in terms of helping the commission do its work. Part of our Article 80 modernization actually also is thinking about how we can engage the commission in a way that is streamlined with some of the Article 80 modernization that we have been doing under Mayor Wu. Just on a personal note, I don't know how many of the people in the audience actually I've had the chance to meet, but I hope that, and I actually thank you for participating in these commission meetings. Public participation and engagement is an important part of the role that the planning department and this commission actually engages in. One of the things that, just a little bit sort of on a personal note, that many of you have been very kind in welcoming me back to the city. I have to remind myself that I'm not actually coming back because I'm now coming into a very different position. The agency that I work for is now part of a planning department, and I know many of you know that was an important agenda for the mayor, which is to really put planning first. And so I will be charged, or I have been charged by the mayor to complete this transition. And I realized that actually this transition requires not only sort of changing many of the habits and the culture around how we've been doing planning and development for almost 70 years in the city. And it's a change that I think we are embracing in the planning department. And we look forward to working with the commission to complete this sort of this idea of actually having planning lead development. And something that I think, again, the subtext of that is also that design is and placemaking becomes a critical component of that transformation. So I'm going to stop there and just thank all of the commissioners for, again, your incredible sort of commitment to our process. And I hope that in the coming months, as I sort of familiarize myself to sort of being back in this in City Hall, but participating in a different role, that I will be coming to you as it's required. And I also want to thank, of course, Diana and Amy, who are two of the important leaders that we have staffing this. And of course, now Christina is the executive director. And I also know that Seth is a regular sort of staff member at this. So I think I'm going to end there. Thank you. And I hope you have a great meeting tonight. But I'm going to excuse myself unless there are questions from the commission for me. So hearing none.
I'm not seeing any, but Kairos, we definitely look forward to that dialogue to see how we can streamline the review process in this Article 80 modernization. So happy to have further discussions as a commission with you to meet that goal.
Yes, and I will be back when that process sort of we're meeting internally to think more about how we're going to roll out some of the early actions. And I think at some point we'll get on the actual BCDC Commission agenda to make that presentation where Amy, Diana, and I know Napur, who's been leading that whole modernization effort, will be actually making a presentation to this commission.
If you don't mind, I just want to say, Kairos, not only welcome, but thank you for the last 2 years of your contributions to the Article 80 Reform Commission from your seat at MIT. And it's exciting that you'll be able to continue a lot of that critical thought in your new role and the continuity of what you've been involved in contributing to date. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Kirk, you've been an important member of the steering committee. I have to say that I had no idea what during the last 2 years that I would actually have the responsibility of implementing it. So if I was overly ambitious as a committee member, now I think this is a clear case where, you know, you actually have to take your own medicine, I think. Anyway, I think there are
Terrific.
many exciting reforms and that I'm anxious to having the opportunity to come back to the commission to engage you in the recommendations that we're working on.
Excellent.
All right. And with that, I think we'll go on to Christina to hear the report from Review Committee on upcoming projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Per the regulations of Article 28 of the Boston Zoning Code, Planning Department staff have prepared the following recommendations for your consideration. Commissioner Love, these are two separate votes, and I think we have some commissioners who are recused on the first vote, so we should probably take them separately tonight. My apologies. A proposed notice of project change to the Article 80B large project entitlement for 22 Drydock Avenue, South Boston waterfront contemplates the construction of a pedestrian bridge connecting the third floor of 6 Tide Street, aka Innovation Square Phase 2 or ISQ2, to the third floor of 22 Drydock Avenue, also known as Innovation Square Phase 3 or ISQ3, over the Northern Avenue right-of-way. The proponent filed a notice of project change on September 24th, 2024, and Planning Department staff hosted a public meeting on October 21st, 2024. Planning Department staff recommend that the Commission vote to review the proposed project.
And commissioners, just to make sure I know who's recused, if you could just say that as I call your name, so I can make sure we get it right. Do we have a motion to review this project?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
Linda Eastley,
Yes.
Jonathan Evans,
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith. I think you said recused, Shauna, just you're on.
Sorry, recused.
David Hassin,
Yes.
Mick Young Kim,
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Yes.
Bill Ron,
Yes.
Laura Solano,
Yes.
Kirk Sykes,
Recused.
and myself, Mimi Love. Yes. Great. We'll review that project later this evening. Moving on to the second one. Christine, I think you're muted.
Apologies. A proposed notice of project change contemplates the First Amendment to the Master Plan for Planned Development Area Number 128, also known as the 776 Summer Street or Edison Power Plant Master Plan. The amendment would change allowed uses on Block A and Block C and modify dimensional regulations for buildings on Block A, B, and C. Simultaneously, a proposed development plan for a 6.8 acre portion of the 15.2 acre parcel, known as Phase 2, seeking Article 80C entitlement, contemplates the dimension and uses of structures, dimension and uses of open spaces, access and circulation, parking and loading, public realm improvements, and phasing components for Blocks A, B, C, and the 1898 Turbine Hall, in accordance with the to-be amended master plan. The proponent filed a PDA master plan amendment and a PDA development plan on September 27th, 2024. Planning Department staff hosted a public meeting on November 6th, 2024. Planning Department staff recommend that the Commission vote to review the proposed project.
And Christina, I think Mimi is recused on this. So do we have a motion to review?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, Jonathan Evans?
Aye.
David Hassin? Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah. Yes.
Mick Young Kim?
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith?
Yes.
Bill Ron?
Yes.
Laura Solano?
Yes.
Kirk Sykes?
Yes.
And Anne Marie Lubenow?
Yes.
And myself, Linda Eastley, yes. Did I miss anybody? All right, and Mimi Love is recused.
All right. So moving along, I think we can go to the presentations for review. We have 2 projects to review, vote, and take public testimony. So the proponent team, do we have them queued up for 17 Bradston and Newmarket? And I will mention, at the last design subcommittee, we had the following commissioners in attendance: Shauna Gillis-Smith, David Hassin, Kathy Koderitis, and Marie Lubinow, and Bill Ron. They participated in the last deliberation, so we welcome your comments first after the presentation.
And
Mimi,
sorry for another amendment. I was not present at the last subcommittee.
Mimi, I'm sorry, the Turbine Hall project involving Redgate, I'm also recused from that. I apologize.
Noted. Thanks, Kirk.
Christina, is this the meeting that I said I did attend?
Yes,
Okay.
I think that must have been
the error.
I didn't catch up with the meeting minute corrections. So Laura Solano.
We look so much alike,
I
guess.
know the landscape,
Yeah.
our landscape architects, they're all.
Commissioner Love, I think the proponent team has all been promoted to co-host. So Jim or whoever's presenting from Embark, if you'd like to start presenting, we'll give you a 10-minute timer and we'll give you a 2-minute warning.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. My name is Jim Ronstock. I'm with Embark Design. And there we go, sharing. With me, I have Moliere, Erica Chai from my office, as well as Natalie Adams from Verdant, the landscape architect on the project, Josh Fetterman from City Realty, the owner, and Don Wiest from the attorney of Dane Torpy. And hopefully D'Artagnan will join as well. Starting off, the project is located, I should say thank you very much for the opportunity to present the project again to both the BCDC and the BPDA. We've been very appreciative of both groups' efforts in refining the project's design as we've moved along, not only the design, but the detailing of the project as well. The project itself is located on, why is this not changing? There we go. The project is located, it's an as-of-right project located at the corner of Southampton and Mass Ave at the corner of Bradston Street, directly adjacent to the Mass Ave connector. It's an as-of-right project consisting of 8 floors of the building plus 1 additional floor of penthouse mechanical space and 2 underground garage spaces, floors rather. The building itself consists of 2 floors of high bay industrial space, along with 6 stories of lab office space above it. As you can see from the timeline below, the project's been ongoing for several years and has changed quite a bit over the course of time through discussions with all the groups mentioned. What we heard over the past couple of meetings together with the BCDC and BPDA working groups have been incorporated into the building. I won't bother to go through every point here, but you're free to read along. At the last meeting, at the subcommittee 2 meeting, it was very well received, the building itself. There was some minor points mentioned to continue to develop alongside Seth's group at the BPDA, including enhancing the entry plaza at the corner of Southampton and Bradston Street, to modify the penthouse slightly to a slightly different orientation of the screen wall assemblies, and excuse me, to study the building's terrace components along the Bradston Street side of the building, integrating the terrace more with the facade integration itself. Just wanted to show this slide that shows the design evolution of the project since we began meeting with the BCDC. First meeting is the upper left, last meeting or most recent meeting is the lower right. And you can see the evolution of the design, the materials, the penthouse assemblies, etc. on the building to the most recent on the lower right, which is far more integrated with the building components itself, with the overall site. The site is located at the corner, as I said, at the corner of South Bradston Street and the Mass Ave connector in the Newmarket Gateway Industrial District. Shown a couple of context photos at the right, just to orient and reference the project and the site itself. Go. Sorry. There we go. I think it skipped ahead a little bit too much, sorry. There we go. We've studied the pedestrian circulation of the project itself. Primary pedestrian circulation coming down Mass Ave from across from the medical center, as well as coming up Southampton to the site. And we've shown in the green some secondary pedestrian circulation to and from the site, from the Melnia Cass and other streets in the neighborhood. We've also shown the vehicular circulation to the site, the orange representing the passenger cars to the underground parking garage, and the magenta color to the loading dock at the rear of the site through a separate alley. It's doing that. Oh, there we go. The ground floor integration of the site shows not only the building, but the integration of the building and the landscape components in and around the building, as well as the freight access to the loading docks at the rear and the separation from the abutting buildings. You'll notice the red dash line is the integration or location rather of the brick base of the building and how it integrates not only around the building, but through the lobby spaces in the building itself. And this was based on a comment that was discussed with the BPDA. We feel it's really enhanced the building, and you'll see that further in the renderings as we get along with the project. The next couple of slides, I'm going to ask Natalie Adams to join in on. What we've shown is the previous scheme of the entry plaza, and now we've moved on towards a new refined plaza design that perhaps Natalie can describe a little bit better than I.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Just to look at this slide, this was our previous design. You'll notice that the entry plaza, pocket plaza, was very permeable from all directions. Next slide, please. We were asked at our last PCDT meeting to look at emphasize the entry more, make it less of that permeability, make it more defined. And what we did, we wanted to add these sculptural elements to it. So you'll note some of the imagery above. And we do still have seating up there, but it's more table seating, you know, that could be movable. And we did lose a couple of trees because we wanted to leave it open for the entry sequence. But on the next page, we did a quick sketch up. Next
One
page.
thing before we jump to the next slide too, Natalie, is that there was a comment made about it was decision made to have the center entrance to the building itself facing the intersection, but there was also a comment that it would be an improved situation if we could reorient the stairs and the entry circulation more towards the curb cut and crosswalk areas at the corner of the site, which we've done here.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Thanks for that, Jim. And here is a SketchUp. And what we're trying to really show is this dynamic concrete wall that has this sculptural aspect to it. And you know, I think this captures the essence of it, but you know, we still need to put a lot of work into it. And I think that's it for me, isn't it, Jim? Thank you.
So moving on, what we wanted to do is we'll show also the public realm. This section through the building itself shows the organization of the building and how it relates to the street. The building itself and the lobby is raised up a couple of feet due to the flood resiliency requirements. And it also shows the integration of not only the lobby space to the main portion of the building and the labs above, but also how the industrial spaces meet and greet, I guess, the streets along Southampton visually and along Bradston, where there's a secondary lobby over there as well. And again, the red line defines where the brick from the building. You're seeing in the section to the right how it meets the ground and then passes through the building and the lobby space, and is an inviting component of the lobby space once you enter the tall space into the lobby.
2 minutes, Jim.
Thank you. Moving on, the massing studies, what we've done since the last meeting was, as I mentioned earlier, there's a revised screen wall at the top of the building and how it surrounds the penthouse. This is more integrating the vertical components and the structure from the building and the facade below, as well as how we've integrated the entry plaza represented in the lower right. So there's a couple different views of that. Moving on, the penthouse itself, what we've done from the earlier scheme with a hybrid penthouse scheme at the left, moving on to more a traditional, if you will, penthouse scheme, to the one at the right that's integrating the facade elements and the vertical structure elements, trying to create more of a traditional penthouse that has some visual aspects seeing through, and we'll work with the BPA as we further on the design but how the actual penthouse screen wall is configured, whether it be a solid component or something that gives you little snippets towards the equipment and the lab components on the roof itself. But you can see also the integration of the penthouse screen wall with the building itself and the facade. Similarly, we worked, as Natalie just mentioned, to update the entry, and these schemes show the integration of not only the building facade down to the ground, but also on the left lower, this was the previous scheme, and the plaza entry scheme and stairs component coming off of the intersection to the new proposed entry plaza configuration at the right, which is more oriented towards the crosswalk, and then leading you towards the entry, an accented canopy component over the entrance, drawing you and leading you into the main lobby of the building.
That's time, Jim.
Oh, I can just whistle through these real fast without any speaking. Just the various images that you saw before, showing the various views in and around the building. With that, I can draw to a close. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. So commissioners, if you want to raise your Zoom hand or your physical hand, I'm happy to call on you for comments.
Maybe could we ask any of the commissioners who were at the last subcommittee to speak to this?
Absolutely. And just as a reminder, it's Laura Solano, David Hassin, Anne-Marie Lubinow, and Bill Ron were at the last subcommittee.
Mimi, I'm happy to speak, but for some reason my Zoom hand has
Okay.
disappeared off of my screen. I don't know where it went.
By all means, chime in if if it doesn't work. So go ahead, David. Thank you.
I was present at the last two meetings, and I just want to compliment the team for their responsiveness and for being willing to explore a number of options with us around the location of the entry, the design of the mechanical screen, the integration of the brick volume, which denotes a different part of the mixed-use program. I personally feel like they have addressed all the principal concerns that we had, including access and the nature of the public space, given the challenges and opportunities that exist on this corner. Really, I don't have too much to add, except that I think it was a very robust back and forth and exchange, and I'm really pleased with where the project has landed.
Thank you, David. Laura Solano?
Could we go to a site plan? And while that's
Full site plan or just the
that's good.
this one?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. one moment. So thank you for your responsiveness. Nice presentation, and I know you all didn't have a lot of time to respond. I wanted to ask about the sculptural walls. And could you talk a little bit more about them? Is it something that you're imagining that is commissioned or that the design team would take care of, and what the materials are?
Sure. I was imagining that our design team would be responsible for them, and we would work back and forth with with Embark on hitting the sweet spot between, playing off the architecture and that the landscape being its own element. But certainly precast to offer that beautiful finish and the preciseness of a precast piece that would go in there, and that it would be, more than a cast in place, because the way the walls are angled and they're drawn up. So that's what I was imagining with these pieces. And if you can go to the next page, it shows the SketchUp. Although, we were really quick in this. I think those images are very nice and they capture what I wanted to see. But that doesn't really
Can
capture
you
it. Yeah. It's a little
maybe
muddy.
zoom in on that?
Yeah.
Sure. Actually, it might be easier to see it. We did it also in a more
I
detailed
do have a
version.
3D model that
This one.
I can share right now, and then I can look around it. It might
I
be
think,
clearer.
I don't think we need that level of detail. I think if we could just zoom in, but make this image big, we see all of your margins on your side. If there's any way to make it a bigger image, I think that's
Yeah,
all
and
we
I don't,
need.
this one doesn't really tell it, because I wanted the
No.
pieces angled. I wanted it, drawn up, and using, technology to weigh in on the meaning of this piece, that it's not just cast in place, it's not just
I think
vertical and horizontal one.
the thing that we had talked about was that we had the opportunity, due to the flood resiliency solution of raising the floor, that we have an opportunity it's about 2 feet that we're working with here, that we can create a space on a very busy street rather, where we can create a sense of place, perhaps a sense of privacy, without being, a public park per se. It's something that's devoted to the building, to the inhabitants of the building, the people that are entering and the visitors coming to the building. But we wanted to create something that had a sculptural element to it, rather than just perhaps a bland wall. Or there was comments earlier about the seating opportunities that we had presented before that might be a little too much for the site, and that we wanted to create something that had a more sculptural element to it. So although there is some seating components there, and there's now reduced width of stairs and so forth, in the opportunity to create more green space, we've also had the opportunity to create this sculpture, whether it be concrete, stone, or some hybrid of both, that work to solve that and create that sense of place at the building.
The only thing I'll offer about that is to think about it in terms of there's a glow about the building, and you might think about whether or not that characteristic, I won't say how, but if that characteristic can also come to this piece. I understand the desire to have it be separate, its own piece with the landscape. But I think as you start to study it, and you've had very little time to do that, but as you start to study it, you can also look at different options in the materiality of it. I like the idea very much. The only other thing I'll say is I actually think the step should be a little bit wider, just a hair. So I know I'm the one that advocated for narrowing it down, but you might think about widening that, particularly as you're facing the building on the left-hand side. So other than that, and again, just, work to get as much landscape as you can in those upper levels for comfort and, atmosphere for people who visit there.
one thing we should add too is that during our discussions with the BPDA recently in a working session, Natalie had proposed not only this version with the stone/concrete sculptural elements at bottom, but we had also proposed maybe a core 10 steel or some type of a metal system as well along the base that linked a little bit more with the building itself. But it was felt that just the durability of the materials and the long-term effects of the metal on the grade and so forth, it might be detrimental to the grade, the sidewalks, et cetera. We've all seen the metal color spill, if you will. So it was felt that the stone and the concrete version was more appropriate. But certainly this can be developed further, but we think we're on the right path towards that kind of sculptural.
Yeah, thanks, Jim and Laura. I'm going to pass it on to Kirk Sykes.
Yeah, so I want to echo David's comments and congratulate you on what appears to be a handsome other half of a gateway. And from a macro public realm perspective, I think this building now frames an entry to the city that's becoming increasingly important. This wicket is followed by the one at Washington and Milne Cass, and further echoed at Columbus and Milne Cass. So this becomes a series of buildings working in sequence in terms of scale that I think is important to signal this gateway to Roxbury and Lower Roxbury and some of the institutions that follow. So I want to congratulate you on that. The only comment I have has to do with the light levels, and this is a bit of minutia surrounding the building and how to create a passive, protected and well lit zone that will encourage it to stay a very embracing public realm that you've created during the daytime when evening comes in. So that is really only my question or comment, and staff can certainly follow up on it. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. Shauna?
Thanks. Thank you, Natalie and Jim, for the presentation. And I have seen this at previous subcommittees, not just the last one. I think that the choice to really control the entry sequence was certainly a wise choice. And I do applaud the potential of the sculptural base. A couple of things that, and I understand the logic of offsetting the stairs and the entry because of getting the stairs right at the corner. I think that there could, in further development as you go ahead with it, I think that there could be some elements within the architecture or the language that help to give you cues to move towards the entrance so that it's not like the stair is just leading you directly into the glass facade. It might be a furniture element, it might be something in the facade, or both. I think, and I do think that when you look at the material choices, precast may be the right choice, but it may not be the right choice, both in terms of the materiality that Laura was talking about, but also precast is most efficient when there's a repeated piece. And it looks like there aren't a lot of repeated pieces. So that's something I think that you can consider as you're moving forward with it. And I also agree with Commissioner Solano that there may be a possibility for other green planting than just trees, possibly even at the green air, the open space in front of the lobby. Maybe not right at the top, but there may be something in the lower area that allows you a place to add an additional level of green that's a little bit of a counterpoint to that one planter bed. But again, I thank you very much for the receptiveness and the inventiveness through the process.
Appreciate it.
Commissioners?
So we were hoping maybe this would kind of like help clarify some of the stuff Laura and Shauna were talking about and what Natalie was trying to convey between the concrete wall, the sculptural nature of it, the line that starts to lead you and start to indicate where the entry is as you approach the stair and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you. This is
Yeah.
helpful.
Thanks, Arm.
Thanks, that's beautiful.
It is helpful to see for sure. I'm not seeing any other commissioners raising their hand. So, Christina, maybe we ask for public testimony.
Happy to. At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised. So I'm going to close the public testimony period.
So then is this appropriate for me to make a motion?
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All right. So all commissioners in favor say yes. Linda Easley,
Yes.
Jonathan Evans,
Yes.
Shauna Gillis-Smith,
Yes.
David Hassin,
Yes.
Mick Young Kim,
Yes.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Yes.
Bill Ron,
Yes.
Laura Solano,
Yes.
Kirk Sykes,
Yes.
and myself, Mimi Love. Yes. So congratulations, this project is approved. And thanks for all of your hard work. I didn't follow this one closely, but I have seen the transformation, and you've gotten great guidance from the commission on this one.
We truly appreciate all your efforts and all your input on the design. We likewise feel that the project has really developed in a positive way and will continue to do so.
Perfect. All right. Good luck with the planning department. They will give you excellent guidance. I think we could move on to 250 Everett Street. I believe we're going to lose Commissioner Lubenow, but we definitely have a quorum. Thank you, Anne Marie. And if the proponent team is ready to present, we can cue them up.
Good evening, members of the commission. While the team pulls up our slides, I just wanted to introduce myself, Tim Alexander with Mill Creek Residential. Appreciate the time and the attention to our proposal. And I'll just quickly outline the process that we've been working through over the past 9 or 10 months. So our project, 250 Everett Street, was first in front of the commission on February 6th of this year. Appreciated all the comments and feedback we got at that time. We then worked really for a number of months with planning staff to make the refinements that you're going to see tonight, which resulted in subcommittee meetings, I believe in September and October, with the subcommittee of the commission. And so I have with me tonight Brian O'Connor and Michelle Littlefield from Cube 3, as well as Ian Ramey from Copley Wolf Design Group, and they're going to run through within 10 minutes our updates on the project.
All right. And while they're pulling that up, I will note at the last subcommittee, Mick Young Kim and Jonathan Evans and myself were in attendance. So it would be terrific to hear from you guys first.
Great. Thank you all. Good evening. Appreciate your time. We're going to try to get through this very quickly. Just high level, what we heard in the last round of comments from this group as well as design subcommittee included really defining the context and development patterns that really drove the building massing and scale here. Within the context of both the approved and future development, really defining the public realm and the landscape approach to the design, clarifying our approach to building mass and scale, and then defining building entry locations and development at the street edge. And so what we really want to do here, Michelle, if you can advance as I talk, that'd be great since we're time sensitive. This is just a reminder of where this site is. We're proposed on Everett Street in the middle of the Wackersy planning study area, which you see here in this slide. The extent of the site is highlighted in blue. We did spend, as was mentioned, a tremendous amount of time with the team and staff to understand the goals of the planning that's really taken place in this area. This map shows our site within the planning guidelines and zoning. The buildings in gray are approved. The areas in red are planning areas that illustrate height limits and FAR constraints. Our site is the white building in the middle, adjacent to the McNamara House on the left, which is 6 floors. Our building and this project is actually compliant with zoning, height, FAR, lot coverage, and setbacks. We did, to really think about the mass and scale within that context, we ran east-west and north-south building sections through the entire planning area. Again, buildings in gray have been approved. And what we wanted to really demonstrate is that our proposed height of 65 feet, which is compliant with zoning and planning, is actually really appropriate in both directions, both sort of following the bell curve from I-90 to Western Ave, dropping down and coming up, and then the east-west section extending from the neighborhood over to Litchfield where it drops down again. We did want to show you as a quick reference, this was the original site plan that was proposed in 2023. We've really worked hard to better coordinate with planning staff goals and comments from the burst BCDC. So if you jump to the next slide, Michelle, the goal was to really think about how this building on the site intersected with the open space and the public realm plan, and how it connected with the envisioned transportation network for the entire neighborhood. So as you can see here, the building shifted 30 feet north, a little bit west, opening up a really wonderful public realm space on the left-hand side or the south side of the page. And then we worked really hard with staff to understand the transportation network for the entire neighborhood so that we could really very carefully relocate building entry positions for vehicular traffic. All loading, all service, and all private vehicles are now contained underneath the building and accessed at the point of the arrow along Everett Street. Jumping to the next slide, we spent a lot of time, with the committee and sort of thinking through the design, and really wanted to dive back in and look at the texture and the pattern of the neighborhood, which you sort of see in blue on this diagram, as well as the scale and the height of the proposed planning areas to the north and west, jumping from the neighborhood up to 65 and 125 feet. And what we did is we started to really think about how that could help us develop a clearer strategy for the building mass and courtyard space that responded to the neighborhood and responded to the future planning in the Wackersee district. So what we did is we started to look around and find precedent examples of a courtyard typology that could really help us develop a strategy for the scale and use of the courtyards and pattern them in a way that would really complement the street edge. A couple of the core examples that we found included Cambridge, a number of them in Boston. And if you jump to the next slide, Michelle, what we found is maybe the most relevant example was 60 Kilmarnock over in the Fenway neighborhood, which has ironically exactly the same building length we're dealing with here, but it has 2 courtyards instead of 3, and they're much shallower. So we wanted to sort of take those typological examples and think about how do we really explore public-private space and the connection of the building to the edge. Within that, we did a series of quick studies. We spent a lot of time with staff thinking about where the main entry to the building is, how it relates to the courtyards, how it relates to the street edge. And if you jump to the next slide, Michelle, this is kind of the site plan where we're at right now. So here you can see all of those changes sort of coalesced into a single plan. Very broad public space on the left-hand side, completely reimagined street edge along Everett, very clear use and delineation of the courtyard spaces, simplified building forms and courtyard edges, a shift of the main entry to the building to the center of the building, and as I mentioned, vehicular access along Everett Street rather than a large corridor on the north side of the site. I'm going to let Ian sort of walk very quickly through the landscape because it's really core to how we approach this project.
Great, thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. So the big move, as you heard, was that we opened up that 1/4 acre open space for the public on the south side. That's indicated in blue. And then we have a series of different public realm experiences along Everett Street. So in purple, we have our active public realm where all the access points into the building are, the main entry, the garage, the bike rooms. The green is vegetated public realm space that buffers the units, and the orange are the resident spaces. Here's a look at our overall plan. I won't spend too much time on this because we have enlargements, but the big move that came out of our last subcommittee was that on the south side, we were really favoring more of a passageway through that space. And we heard from the commissioners that it would be better for us to explore creating usable open space on the south side. So we've made some significant improvements there, which we can look at. The other big move that we did is in the 2 central courtyards. So really tried to articulate the entry into the building and making that entrance part of a courtyard experience. And then to take the central courtyard and to really demarcate the fully public area in areas that are sort of semi-public and used for the residents. And then the courtyard to the far right, which is a resident access only, really tried to clarify the entry into the building for the residents. So here's an enlargement of the southern open space. The image in the upper left is where we were before, really showing more of a passageway through the open space. And we were encouraged, as I mentioned, to create different experiences of usable space. What we have now is a plaza space at the back of sidewalk that has trees, a central open lawn space for flexible recreation use. And then on the top of the plan, we have a softer stone dust experience for the residents. And here's just a street level view that shows the fore plaza of the plaza experience with the lawn in the background. And then again, maintaining the access to the Star Market and the future planned Wackersy open space. One of the other things that we're asked to look at is the treatment of the active zone where we have the blue bikes. In the upper left, we had shown a very sort of aggressive green wall element, and we were encouraged to maybe approach it more realistically with an architectural intervention. So now we're showing panelized screens that integrate with the building facade and still allow for vegetation to climb up that. And so, you know, we look to inspiration for other difficult urban growing conditions. We look at the Museum of in Oslo, which shows a really great installation of vertical green walls. And of course, if that doesn't work, there is a lot of precedent in Alston and Brighton for murals. And we know that there's opportunities that we could explore with not-for-profit groups to make that a really great public realm facade. And then if we look at the 2 centralized courtyards, again, as Brian mentioned, we really worked with Cube 3 to highlight the access into the building and making it part of the courtyard experience. So we increased the vegetation at the back of sidewalk to direct pedestrians into the plaza and give a very clear demarcation of where the building entry is. And then we have a threshold moment sort of in the midpoint of the courtyard. It's an arbor element that allows us to control access to the back part, the deeper recesses of the courtyard that could be open to the public during business hours, but potentially closed down after hours or closed down for special events so that the residents could use that open space just for the residents. On the right side, again, we've really tried to articulate the access into the building by having sort of a classic garden entry through the courtyard that's controlled with a gate out at the street.
1 minute, Ian.
Okay. And here's just an image that shows the articulation of the central entry into the courtyard. And then this is a shot of the residential entry in the northern courtyard.
So just very quickly, we had a really clearly delineated building design strategy. I'm going to ask Michelle to walk through this quickly. Basically, just really thinking about how we're developing these edges. Here's a quick overall shot of the building. Very cleaned up massing and details on the building. We have made a fairly significant shift in the material palette to a warmer tone down at the ground floor. We had been asked to look at condenser locations and we're really satisfied you're not going to see those. We wanted to get quickly to a few of the renderings. Here you can see the warm tone panel, the sort of very delineated ground floor, the warmer brick palette down low, the sort of carving away at the corners and edges, main courtyard in the middle, with the amenity space, double height, and the entry on the corner, the pergola that Ian had mentioned. The next image zooms in a little bit further on that. And here you can really see how the landscape and these courtyards become active, engaging entry spaces into the building, connecting both to the architecture and the design, which really supports the use of these public spaces. The last image that we have that's a rendering is sort of this south public realm open space that Ian described in really wonderful detail, connecting the edges of the building. And then very quickly, we had a couple of quick SketchUp shots to just show the building in the context of the future development massing as we go down Everett Street towards Western Ave. This is a view of the building that you really will never see once development happens in the area. These red lines are the outlines of future development, which will eventually hide this edge. Jump to the next one, Michelle. This is a view across the parking lot in front of the Star Market, looking at that southern open space on the right-hand side in a little bit more detail here. And then I think we have one more view. This is looking down the future public street on the western side as the transportation and infrastructure network starts to fill out. Very quickly on materials, very simple massing on this building, very clean, very clear. Same with the palette of materials. Very darker horizontal fiber cement panel at the top floors and at all the insets, a vertically oriented rain screen panel in a warm tone. And then we have a brick base to the building that's really a rich, dark reddish black almost, to bring some warmth and vitality to the edge of the street without ever being cold. I think that's about it. I hope we were on time. Obviously, a tremendous amount of work has gone in since the last hearing, and we're excited to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioners.
I can get going. Sorry about my hand.
No worries about the hand, John.
Sorry, I couldn't find the button there. I would just commend you for the work. I think this is a project that's gotten a lot better through the review. I think from a sort of massing, the form has always been clear, and I think the last meeting really kind of unlocked something with this sort of provocation and really thinking about actually entering off the street into the courtyards. And so that's really kind of helped to better define and give those spaces more of a kind of face to the neighborhood and a identity that really helps kind of bring the product together. So I am encouraged by that development. Yeah, the massing has been cleaned up, but that sort of elevation strategy in terms of the materials has been cleaned up a little bit. So I think it's really come a long way, and excited to see where we've taken this.
Thanks, Jonathan. McYoung?
Yeah, I want to concur with what Jonathan's saying. I've seen this all as it's moved along, and I even got a sneak peek yesterday. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that in public, but I even see some refinement from yesterday to today, which I really appreciate. I think the project's really gotten strengthened through the process, and so I'm in support of the project as a whole, and I think there's a lot of great things. I know there were some things that I had brought up the last time we did subcommittee, which was kind of integrating entry with garden, and I think there's a nice way in which you've resolved that. I'm still not sure about the frontage where the bike racks are, but I feel like you could work with BP to figure that out, because I know that was a comment that was given to you yesterday, or maybe the day before yesterday. And I also think that the southern part feels more like a community destination rather than just a kind of walkthrough. So I think overall, there's a lot of great things in the project. Really appreciate all the great work you guys have put into this.
Thanks, McYoung. Kirk?
So thank you. Very nice presentation, and very comprehensive. Perhaps with the exception of one thing, I really don't get a sense of the context on the other side of Everett Street and the scale surrounding this building. In your diagram 3, you sort of highlight some of the massing of the newer buildings in the neighborhood, but most of it is kind of bracketing your site with quite a bit to the south and to the, I guess, north, or along the highway and along the river. So I think if you could share some images that show how this fits into the surrounding neighborhood. And then having read the letter from the 250 Everett Street Impact Advisory Group, there seems to be some concern about the setbacks on Everett and perhaps some of the impact on light and air for the residential buildings on the other side of the street. So happy to have you address that, or hear how you might address that in a future meeting.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the comment. We have, Michelle, if you don't mind going back to slide, the slide that shows the line, maybe one more back. Yeah, so it's a great question. We spent a lot of time really thinking about the scale of the building, not only within the broader context, Kirk, but also like the immediate context and what's going to happen in the future. And so the McNamara House immediately to our left here is 6 stories. The Petco building immediately to our right is a tall single-story retail building. On the other side of the street, opposite our main entry, and the sort of area of energy of our project is the largest and tallest of those buildings. In trying to respond to some of the comments we heard from the neighborhood and the IAG, we felt like migrating the entry and that active courtyard to the largest of the buildings in the neighborhood seemed to make sense. We also pulled the roof deck and all of the other sort of amenitized sections of the building to really front on what we were thinking were the most public and active spaces, including the southern courtyard. We do think that, you know, there is definitely a scale adjustment across Everett Street for sure. In the sort of east-west section, which runs north across the page, there is in the Wackersy planning guideline a really, you know, fairly abrupt transition there. And this project is within that whole planning study area, which does delineate the height in this zone at 65 feet. Behind us in the parking lot, which is open right now, that's Star Market, obviously a potential future development site. That's split between 65 and 125 feet in total height. So what we're really thinking about is how this building can step from the neighborhood up to that 65 by sort of setting back the top floors, kind of creating a very delineated base and thinking about how the scale and texture of these edges really do help the neighborhood. But you know, until the rest of this area grows up around us, I think we're trying the best we can to really address those neighborhood concerns. And I think as other development happens in the future, this will become a really nice transitional piece to that other neighborhood. I don't know if that helps answer your question or not, but
No, it did. And if you could just go back to slide 3, I guess I just wanted, it was the one with the new buildings. I think it's like your, yep, that's it. So clearly, you know, this is what has evolved in terms of concentration of mass. And then, you know, you're kind of blazing a new trail here in the more residential fabric. And so that's where I was going. And so let me let my fellow commissioners comment, and thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll just chime in and you know, just acknowledge all of the work that the proponent team has really done to kind of deal with the scale shift from what is, you know, planned for the Wackersy area to the neighboring community. I think that shift on the south side of the plan to create that open space was a pretty significant move, not only just to create that pass through, but also to deal with some of the alignments and aligning the courtyard on the right-hand side with the road across the way. You know, based on the parameters of the project, I feel like we worked with the team to get the massing to be as responsive as it possibly could to the context of today and the context of the future. So I think I, you know, feel positive about the outcomes and the number of iterations that they did to get us to this point. I'm going to shift gears and then talk about the materiality, because I think we wrestled with the material choices that the team has made as well. And if you could go to one of the perspective images at the end where we, you know, encourage them to have a solid base where they have, you know, brick at the base of the buildings. I really appreciate the 2-story move that highlights where the main entrance is. I do think that there might be refinements to continue to work with the planning department on material, you know, choices. Is it the right color of tan? Is it like, you know, I hope it's not a simulated wood look panel,
Nope.
but these are all details that I feel good about the choices you've made in materials. And I do think that the composition will be responsive to the scale of the adjacent, you know, neighboring buildings. I will say the one center courtyard, again, a planning, you know, detail that you could work with. I wonder if that trellis component, if you could go to that perspective, the trellis becoming a gate to to that open space may not be a positive, resolution to that, but that's a detail that I think you can work. I know what you're trying to solve, the security barrier, but it may not be as positive as it's rendered in this, perspective. But those are my comments. I think you guys have done a great job at responding to our feedback. Maybe I'll pass it on to Laura Solano.
Thank you, Mimi. And thanks to the team for doing so much work in a relatively short amount of time. And I think one of the things that you've been quite successful at is that borrowed landscape like you have in these courtyards are part of the public realm. And I think you've done a pretty good job of that, with save for the courtyard that is the furthest north. So if we could look at that, it's the private residence one, where the redesigned resident courtyard, if you could bring up a perspective of that. So one thing I'll say about this is that I understand the desire to have a difference between all of the courtyards, but I think that I'm not so sure that this feels like it would contribute to either the public realm or the residents. It feels pretty enclosed to me, and people that live in cities have so little green space to go to that I could imagine it would be really terrific to come and hang out here. But I'm not so sure that those niches for seating would really get used well. And part of that, I think, has to do with the height of the planters. Perhaps there's a way to, if you want to keep with this scheme, to maybe provide some slope from the building edges towards the path, or to think about maybe making the spaces carve into that entry walk a little bit more. It feels unnecessarily formal to me without much payback. The other thing I wanted to do is let's go look at the park on the south side, which, oh my gosh, the difference is just night and day. It's amazing. And I really thank you for making that big move that makes this possible. Two very simple things. I would think about whether or not the lawn could have some topography to it. We don't know what the grading is, east, west, or even north, south. But as you study this more, think about whether or not that lawn could have some dimension to it, so that it adds something both as you look in and as you're within. And then this is a really minor thing. There's a perspective that goes all the way down this, if we could look at that yeah. You've done so much to kind of screen out what's happening on the other side of this, except making that pathway absolutely focused on what is now the rear of the Star Market. And I wonder if there's something you could do with the end of that path to kind of bring more green into that view corridor, so that you're kind of your view is deflected into the park as opposed to a straight shot to the Star Market. But otherwise, I'm really impressed with all of the work that you've done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other commissioners, but Bill Ron.
Thank you, Mimi. And thank you, Brian, for a very clear presentation and thoughtful design. And there are aspects of the massing along the street that I find quite nuanced in a positive way. I also acknowledge that my fellow commissioners who've been following this project are very enthusiastic, and I want to acknowledge that. But I have not I guess every time you presented to one group, I was assigned to a different group. So I didn't see this as it followed along. And I just want to share at least some immediate reactions that raise questions. It's probably too late to raise the questions, but I feel duty bound to at least try. As I say, the massing I think is reasonably positive, but I just don't understand the reason why the southern edge of the project has all the open space in it. And so then I said to myself, well, there must be a very direct walkway, corridors leading to that, or is it an entry, or in other words, the space seems to me tangential and almost an afterthought to the day-to-day life of the residents of the building. And so that's one thing that I really don't understand. It's just the admittedly very beautiful open space. It seems separated from the life of the building. And evidence of that is I see bike storage here facing that open space. And is bike storage a very good space for that purpose when other things might engage the open space? And then the last thing is a detail, but I'm looking at the way the parking garage works and thinking about cars coming up the ramp and then making an immediately left out the door. Seems like a kind of awkward way to get out of the parking garage. Now, I defer to my fellow landscape architects here as to other solutions to that problem, but it seems like it's a very tight left turn out as people are trying to come in and going out to the street, if I understand the drawing correctly. There it is. So I'm assuming you come up in a clockwise fashion, make a quick left as people are trying to come in with a very hard turn. It would theoretically be better. Yes, exactly. Thank you for, is that Laura doing this? It just doesn't look like it's going to work. So those are the big question about the engagement of the open space with the rest of the building, and then in this detail are my two questions.
Thank you. Appreciate the questions. I might let Ian take the southern open space one, but as far as the parking ramp goes, I think we're still studying this really hard with our traffic engineers. The issue I think we've been trying to address is how to get move in, move out, loading, trash, and everything else completely off of Everett Street. And so there's sort of this T-shaped turning movement for trucks that has kind of driven the parking ramp to the location that it is. We have coordinated it with traffic to the point where this does pass all the turning movement tests. So technically it's there. Experientially, I agree with you. And I think we're definitely committed to continue to sort of develop that and make sure that it's going to be a reasonable and comfortable experience. We have been challenged with making sure we're tying into the below grade parking in a manner that's somewhat efficient too. So a lot of constraints here. I think it's a great comment, and we're committed to continuing to try to explore that. So it's a great comment. I think we know that it works technically, but the experience is just as important. So I think it's a valid point. I'll just touch on the southern open space really quickly. Broad brush, we spent a lot of time with the staff talking about and thinking about the Wackersy planning study, and I won't speak for them, but also thinking about how this building could fit in a way that really responds to the planning goals, potential future green space, connectivity, and the preservation of a lot of existing trees which exist on that southern edge. And so, Ian, I'll let you kind of finish that. But I think a lot of it had to do with sort of aggregating as much public realm space as we could, looking forward to the planning and the tree preservation aspect. Ian, I don't know if you have a better answer to that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty clear. We definitely wanted to try to preserve as many of the trees on the southern property line. So that was a good indication of why we would put the open space there. We also heard from our neighbors at McNamara House, which is to the left, that they really don't have any appreciable open space. And I think our client had conversations with them about allowing them to access and use and activate that open space as well. And then in terms of the uses of the building on the southern side or the left side of the building, we're envisioning that there'll be a fitness use there for the residents, and we see a lot of good spill out activities that can happen on the lawn there. And then the treatment of the bike storage is really, I think, being envisioned a little bit more as like a bike lounge, so more glass and more activation and maybe spill out activities. So we're hoping that we'll get good activation on the south side, on our side of the building as well.
And if I could just add from the planning department's point of view, this is Seth Reisman. This project, like all projects, right, we have competing priorities, and it was a very clear priority for the planning department to get the vehicular access and loading within the building itself, seeing as we weren't able to actually create a secondary street network as part of this project, though the project was designed to allow for streets immediately to the north and west of it as part of a potential build out for that future larger parcel. And so this project does, I think, a great job setting up new sidewalk edges for those future complete streets. And therefore, we were left with the choice of finding the right spot to get into the building and get loading in, combined in the same curb cut, not creating additional curb cuts onto Everett Street. So agreed, it is a challenge. The layout is a challenge and can continue to be looked at how it operates internal to the building. I think we were also making sure that we try to activate the open spaces as much as possible, but deem that this was not necessarily the right building or location for retail in this area. So it comes down to, I think, the distribution of amenity spaces, which we can continue looking at with the proponent.
So Bill, I'm going to assume you don't have any other questions?
No, I don't. I mean, I appreciate the frankness of the response, and somehow urge that some of these things be considered as details emerged in the building. And I'll have to look for bicycle storage areas that have the level of life of the building that engages the open space. The amenity space, of course, facing south onto that park space could be very nice, for instance.
Commissioners, any other comments? I'm not seeing any, Christina, so we want to invite the public for any public testimony. I think now's the time.
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raised hand function and dial 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised. So I'm going to close the public testimony period.
So commissioners, I'm looking for a motion for this project. Kirk, I believe you were talking.
No, I'm okay.
No.
Sorry.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Mimi, I'll make a motion to approve. I think there were some really good pieces that were raised by Laura and Bill. And so I would advocate that the planning department continue to work with the proponent on those. But motion to approve.
I second that.
All right. I'm going to call on all commissioners, and if you agree with the motion, please say aye. Linda Easley,
Aye.
Jonathan Evans,
Aye.
Shauna Gillis-Smith,
Aye.
David Hassan,
Aye.
Mick Young Kim,
Aye.
don't have Bill Ron,
Aye.
Laura Solano,
Aye.
Kirk Sykes,
Aye.
and myself, Mimi Love, aye. I think, congratulations, but I do think there is a bit of work to do with the planning department, and we look forward to seeing how it develops.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
We're now moving on to new projects, and I'm going to hand it off to my co-chair, Linda Easley, to run the second half of the meeting.
Thank you, Mimi. We have two projects, commissioners, to get through, and I want to support the earlier motion to end our meeting at 7:30. So we have two projects to complete in a little less than an hour, and we'll start with 22 Drydock, and we have Shauna and Kirk recused. If both of you could turn your camera and audio off, but remain in the meeting, that would be great.
Yes, thank you. Recused.
Thanks, Kirk. And do we have a presentation from the planning department to start us off, Christina?
We do. It'll be Seth, and then we'll flip it to the proponent, and then it'll be Seth one more time.
Get me twice in one project tonight. Thank you, commissioners. The proposed project is located in the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park section of the South Boston waterfront, which, as you know, is a mixed-use marine industrial and industrial compatible district of the city, including research and development. The proposed project here is a pedestrian bridge spanning between two research and development buildings. The planning department, in conjunction with other city departments, has determined that this project has met the threshold of exceptional operational and programmatic benefit. In addition to the exceptional benefit of this connection to the mission of the facility proposing the connection, the city has also determined that the project is providing exceptional benefit to the public realm through exceptional design and investment in public realm, infrastructure throughout the Raymond L. Flynn Marine Park. So the planning department, feels that pedestrian bridges are not considered except in cases of demonstrated and exceptional operational and programmatic need, most commonly in medically oriented facilities, and where the benefit is to both a private entity and to the city is of an exceptional nature. Excerpted on the right is from the BCDC guidelines for pedestrian bridges between buildings, which I believe was circulated to the full commission before the meeting. But an excerpt here: bridges are acceptable only when they accommodate crucial and necessary movement that cannot be handled at or below grade, and only when their use does not diminish the level of pedestrian activity in the public realm. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the proponent to present.
Thank you, Seth. Good evening, commissioners, and thanks for taking the time this evening to review this project change with us. Joe is pulling up, or Klaus is pulling up the presentation now. So this is just a rendering of our proposed bridge that links both our referred to as ISQ facility, which is located on your right, and ISQ3 is on your left. If we can go to the next slide, please. The next slide just provides a bird's eye view of to give the commissioners an orientation, if you will, of where the bridge would link the two buildings together. You can see the design center at the bottom, Drydock to the right, and the EDIC garage to the immediate left of LC2. This gives you a good orientation of the massing of the buildings and the connection of the bridge. Next slide, please. So the reasoning for the bridge or the link. So this link, this bridge is really linking two critical facilities or assets together. Both of these facilities are designed to both do research and development, but also importantly, there's the advent of manufacturing our cell therapy products that are really pointed to and bespoke to our T1, the type 1 diabetes therapy. This is an innovative therapy that requires dosing of live cells, which is first in kind, to patients that are pre-prepped and ready to receive this treatment. Importantly, there is time sensitivity associated with the finished product. So once we do have a final dose, we need 72 hours. It's only 72 hours before we get that dose to a patient that's prepped in a clinic any place in the country. And the link would allow us to facilitate the assay testing, materials movement, and instrumentation to and fro between the operating parameters of both these facilities in the process of manufacturing these critical drugs. I do want to call out that we looked at many different solutions to try to get to the best possible solution associated with this, to and including a tunnel, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. Next slide, please, Joe. So again, a little bit of a close-up. So here's the LC1 facility in the top right, LC2 on the bottom left. The link you can see affords the movement of materials, consumables, and what we call WIP, or work in process product, between the two facilities for the myriad of testing that needs to be done on those doses before they leave the facilities. We tested trying to make this happen at the ground level with vehicular trucks. These doses are FDA validated GXP material, so there's a myriad of different control prerequisites associated with that, to and including the CPI, or the cryogenic pharmaceutical intermediate, has to be moved at minus 80-degree temperature, so minus 170 degrees F. So it's a very delicate and critical process. So we could not necessarily get to where we needed to be using vehicular traffic, so we did look at a tunnel connection. Next slide, please, Joe. And then looking at the cross section of the facility subgrade between LC1 and LC2, you can see that there are multiple different impediments to the introduction of a bridge, to and including garage levels not at the same lineal plane across the street, if you will, and a myriad of utilities at the 6-foot level, plus storm infiltration. And so when we looked at testing the feasibility of a tunnel, it really became untenable, both from the constructability perspective and also because the grades in the different garages were different, or different at different levels. And then, of course, having to make connections through pre-existing foundations that go into parking garages, and the uncontrolled environment of a parking garage really allowed us not to take this particular approach any further than the deep study that we did. So so to conclude on that, really the merits and the impotence of the bridge is to facilitate the science, but most importantly, the manufacturing elements required to get these doses out the door in the timeframes we need to get them to patients in the field. So those are the merits behind the bridge. I know I'm talking pretty quickly. We only have 10 minutes, so I'm going to turn this over to Joe Mamaya-Cavecchier, and he'll walk you through some of the architectural nuances and design considerations for the bridge.
Thanks, Chuck. On this slide, we are really focusing on images that were inspirations of the area, the maritime vernacular, looking at the landscaping, looking at the edges, how land and water meet, and looking at the built environments, looking at architecture, ships, and docks. All of this leads us to a moment where we can have a iconic gateway in the Marine Industrial Park, offering a contemporary interpretation of the neighborhood's industrial vernacular. So we worked with the city, and there's a number of things that we are looking at from a design point of view. We're looking at a clear span with no supports that can be seen. So there's no visual and physical impact on the public realm. We want to have that connection at the third level, so there's plenty of clearance above the road, and we'll show that in a little bit more detail. The design wants to have a really light structural expression with the glass to reduce the visible bulk and solidity of the building, and the bridge itself. And the bridge itself wants to be a seamless integration with both facades, so it becomes an intentional design. Next one, please. This ground floor gives you a really good understanding of where LC1 and LC2 down below, what the programs are in those buildings themselves, and the relationship to the public realm and the street. So with that context, we're looking at the bridge so that it has a perpendicular connections to the two facades. So you can see that dotted line that represents that upper facade, no visible supports, and a connection at a level of science at the upper third floor. We want to minimize the impact of the public realm by looking at the existing light fixtures and light poles, the street trees, which are so critical, and obviously the placement of the bridge has to be respectful to the entryways for LC1 and LC2. Next one, please. The next one really gives you, this section of relationship here, that cross section of that span of the bridge of nearly, 98 feet from building to building. That connection is critical at that third level from a program point of view, and it allows a nice clearance of more than 33 feet above Northern Ave. And of course, that respect for that public realm. The contouring of the ground plane is really critical. You can see the Northern Ave Road, and you can see the stepping onto the sidewalk, the bus shelters that are there, and the graceful transition to both buildings is really based on resiliency and addresses sea level rise. Worth mentioning right here is our consultant, RWDI, who has prepared a letter of opinion for the pedestrian wind comfort. It's a qualitative analysis based on their experience on this environment, on the buildings that are placed in this environment. And there's no additional velocity of winds based on this current design.
2 minutes, Joe.
Sure. Next one. Real quick, this is some of the diagrams. One of the key things here is a centric truss design to be sleek and minimal. The middle image right in there, you can see the structural member in the middle. We moved that there in such a way that it really opens up the corners and maximizes the visual transparency from the ground. Next one, please. You can really see the section of the bridge here, the elegance and functionality, the shaping, and certainly the underside contouring of that bridge was really key as it spans over the road and connects into the two buildings. The structure is light and dynamic, and you can see the center beam it really is a strong piece, once again, giving that graceful transition at the corners. It's glass on 3 sides with additional frit pattern for the performance of solar heat gain. Worth mentioning also is the light, indirect lighting with LEDs and water, snow, ice mitigation with gutters on either side at the bottom of the bridge. Next one, please. The upper image is that moment, the iconic moment, minimizing the visual and physical impacts, no supports that can be seen, unique form making. On the left-hand side, you can see that interior experience. Once again, that structure, how nice it's being worked and elegant within that structure, the wraparound glass, and you can see now some frit that has been integrated with that glazing system based on the performance. Next one, please. You can see at eye level approaching the site, that iconic moment where there's the interpretation of the industrial vernacular, the connection between ISQ2 on the left and ISQ3 on the right. Next one, please. And then a little bit closer to the site itself, you see this wonderful civic space on the right-hand side, which defines the entry to ISQ3. And you can see the lightness, the careful treatment of transparency and light colors and hues and the materials, scale and proportions as it connects into the building. Next one, please. And of course, looking at it from a nighttime scene, looking at how the light is celebrating the structure and the form, and done so in such a way that it's not a distraction to anyone in the public realm. Next one, please. And that's our conclusion at that point. I don't know if Chuck has anything for closing, but I think we're ready for the Q&A for this.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Seth is going to give us some of the comments from urban design.
Thank you, Linda. So having determined that a below-grade connection is infeasible, we also looked at the siting of the bridge and endorsing that closer towards the end of Northern Avenue, which we think helps to create a gateway moment near, but not too close, to the intersection of Northern Ave and Drydock. Planning department staff have been working with this proponent to make sure that the proposed bridge is in keeping with the intent of the BCDC guidelines for pedestrian bridges between buildings, if not all of the specific criteria, as well as the following directives from planning staff that we think largely overlap with BCDC design guidelines, including that the span must be clear, no structural elements are allowed in the public right of way. It must be located high above the street. It must limit visual and physical impact on the public realm, must maximize transparency and minimize visual weight. And the architectural expression must respond to the industrial context and be expressive of a gateway within the marine park. Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. The commissioners were looking just at the bridge today. And I know that several of us have had trouble with our raising hands function. So I'm going to ask that we just kind of depart from that for this project and the next one. And when you have a comment, please just begin. And just as a reminder, we will lose a couple of commissioners at 7:30. So if you could keep your remarks concise. Commissioner comments. Bill?
Since no one else has raised their hand on what is, of course, a very tricky question, and I probably would open it with wondering whether we may want to also. I for one, I think this is a very important question for the commission, and I'd hate to have it pressed into a 5-minute conversation for such an important question. Back in the 2000s, we discussed this issue quite a bit in the commission. Those of you who were on the commission will remember that, and it was a very fruitful conversation. David Manfredi was very involved in it, as was I, and many others. And of course, it was in the depth of the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, 2010, and the insurance company on Stewart Street made a real plea to the city when there was no building going on, that it wanted a bridge across Stewart Street. And it was much discussed, and the city pressed them very hard, and I think we have to admit they produced a really beautiful bridge. Now, it's all in the eyes of the beholder. Some may not like it, but most of us thought it was beautiful, but it was a result of the economic times, and that was 16 years ago. My problem, Seth and others, is that many of the justifications for this were very much justifications we really rejected at the time, and so I say that because I recognize that for Vertex, the technical issues are very strong, and we have to be responsive, but we have to think about then other solutions. And one other solution is to show us a really beautiful bridge. I'm not going to cast aspersions on the bridge shown. The presentation made it was quite clear, both its intellectual justification and its placement. But it could be that we should be setting a standard based on extraordinarily beautiful bridges that are presented to us by petitioners. I question the connection of the bridge to the aesthetic nature of the buildings. The two buildings are of a type, aesthetic type. The bridge is attempting to be different, but it does it tie the whole thing together in a powerful way. I would raise one question that one could ask, what happens when the bridge is at the 4th level or the roof level? All of this, I'm not playing architect here, but to give you examples of something that is a bridge higher than 33 feet off the street level, because I think one of the problems with the bridges is they do impinge on the view corridors. Yeah, of course, they impinge on the public activity of street life too. So I say all these things as a way to introduce a conversation that I hope might have enough time, because it's too important an issue. We see it in many other cities, start with Minneapolis, that have really compromised their urbanity with bridges. So I turn to everyone and ask that we might figure a way to really delve more deeply into this, if that's appropriate.
Thank you, Bill. Are there specific things you'd like the proponent to bring to a future conversation?
Is that a question for me?
That's a question for you, yes.
Well, I think the question of the element of beauty is important. I know that's a slippery slope, but I do think that's important. And so if we want to start discussing bridges in non-hospital situations, I understand I've advocated for bridges for hospitals, but in non-hospital situations, then I think we should be looking at the potential quality of the bridge. That would be one thing to bring before us. And another might be this whole question of the height of bridges off the street, because I know that's come up in a couple of our things in the last 15 years, reviews, and it does make in my mind, it does make a difference when the bridge is higher than the one shown here.
Thank you so much, Bill. I know I was part of those initial discussions about bridges amongst a couple of other things that we were discussing at the time. So I remember those debates well. Mimi, I see your hand up, and just as a reminder, if your hand function is not working, please just feel free to jump in.
I was playing around while Bill was talking. I figured out the hand. So thanks, Bill, and thanks for those comments. They're super helpful. Could we have the proponent bring up, maybe it's the building section that I want to look at, because just to tag on to what Bill was saying, you know, just to understand, is this floor level the right floor level? There's a section, and I believe the floors are off by a foot. And I'm just curious if we went to an upper floor, are they more aligned? Are they worse aligned? Because I think that also will have a lot to do with where the bridge lands. So that would be something I would like to know in a subcommittee setting. Did you look at other? And it wouldn't, lower doesn't make sense. And you might have a quick answer for me now.
I think let me, it's not going to probably be an answer, but maybe it's just a, part of the conversation. What we did share with your team a supplemental package. And in that supplemental package, and maybe we bring that up, class, it's on page 17, which is the elevation of the existing ISQ 2 building. It might portray it best. is this one right in here. When we were looking at locations for there's 3 or 4 positionings of the bridge that we looked at. Certainly one of the key things was a perpendicular facade on either the right side or the left side and how it connected into ISQ3. We certainly looked at elevations. And when we looked at the elevation, you can just imagine that bridge going to the upper portion of it. By keeping it where it is on the 3rd level, it allows for a landing area that's respectful of all that area around that facade to give it a context by which it does connect. So that's one of the things that we were thinking of as a architectural team as to how does that make sense from a architectural point of view? At the same time, looking at it from a programmatic point of view is doing critical connections with labs, knowing that the most important thing here is the public realm, right? The elevation here and with the bridge, we did consider those things.
All right, and thank you for bringing it up. And I don't mean to ask you to bring any more materials. This is really just comments for a future discussion.
Sure.
I think
sure.
one thing that would definitely help is a scale comparison of the length of this bridge. I'm trying to figure out, how does this compare, for instance, to the Liberty Mutual Bridge? Is it just as long, longer, shorter? That would just be a helpful comparison for me to see, or any other bridge that would help us bring scale to this would be helpful. And I think the challenge that you have is the glass material. I really appreciate that you're looking at frit rather than, a different type of glass that's going to be more reflective or darker. But that's your challenge, right? Is meeting, energy code and trying to get it as transparent as possible.
Sure.
And then lastly, in plan, it'd be nice to see other locations you studied to understand why you've locked in this location.
Sure. Those are all good comments, and we'll do that.
Thank you.
By the way, there is someone on the Vertex team who is working, prior to this at Liberty Mutual. So we actually took a tour of that bridge, and so we have that context and that knowledge. We brought that to the sensitivities to this bridge and certainly to the detailing of it.
That's great.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mimi. Commissioners, other comments, things that you'd like to learn more about in a future discussion?
Yeah, I guess I pick up on something that that Bill said around just the architectural sort of the language of this bridge relative to the buildings and sort of what is that relationship. I think the comment of those buildings are sort of a type, and this bridge had is just a little bit more on its sort of what is the big idea, and in terms of also kind of types of drawings, I imagine this sort of ceiling underside of this is really important to sort of really understand more about what the potential is for that to be a canvas for something. And I don't mean it literally as a canvas for sort of art, but just as an attitude, really to understand what is the pattern making, how the materials work together, just to understand. That's just an important component of the public realm, that underside. I also, maybe to pick up on something that was said from Seth, just the positioning of this sort of in plan. Again, it's close to the main entries of one of the buildings. So just, I do wonder how the form of this really kind of works with the kind of recessed kind of courtyard for that building. So I just wonder, as we think about the positioning of this in plan, how that starts to kind of relate to the building, right? And does it detract from, or how does it sort of work in concert with the building? Yeah, I think to Mimi's point, the glass makes sense. I imagine there's been some analysis around, birds, stuff like that, that comes into play here. So yeah, I think I don't want to talk in circles. I think understanding what some of the big ideas are to just really kind of elevate this to Bill's kind of call here, I think would be important, and just pushing the design further.
Thank you, Jonathan. Other thoughts, commissioners? I can add just a few. I'm so glad Jonathan brought up one of the comments I had jotted down, kind of the importance of the ceiling to the street. And, is there something clever in terms of lighting or materials that could be done to that underbelly? I also really appreciate the elegance of the asymmetry of this bridge, and picking up on Bill's comments and others, as we continue to look at design. As we continue to look at design and materials and location, I would love to see ideas that you may have had for the bridge as you've been working with the planning department, and be able to bring those to us in a future discussion.
Okay. Understood.
Thank you. Other commissioner comments before we get public comment?
I think, Linda, I just want to chime in to sort of Bill's comments earlier around sky bridges. I think I want to be very clear about some of the guidance that we shared earlier from the planning department. This is a bridge that, given the particular context of the sort of need associated with this bridge and the sort of life-changing technology that will be part of the program here, we are in support of that. I think to acknowledge, this piece of the design excellence, I think we absolutely want to hold this to, again, the level of design rigor that we have for many other conditions. And I think the Liberty Mutual example is an example we had shared with the team. And I think there's a lot of merit here in terms of its current location from a height standpoint, in terms of its composition overall, and the sort of heights associated with the two sort of buildings that it's connecting. So Bill, we'd love to sort of engage more directly with you and the commission on getting your guidance and recommendations around the design and aesthetic of this particular feature. I think some of the comments we've heard from you all are great, but really do want to emphasize our support as a planning department for this particular effort. And also note that in addition to this sort of bridge, we are also bringing to bear some much needed public realm improvements here in the Marine Park, which are coming to bear due to this pedestrian bridge here that focus on Hall Road and public realm improvements here in the Marine Park. So there are a series of really great benefits that focus on this. And I think, we are certainly not looking to, these are a sort of an extraordinary effort and element that is rarely approved in our city. And that's something that we hold to a very high regard. And I think both the exceptional nature of the life-changing drugs that are being produced here and the sort of particular industrial nature of this location brought us to our support here, and would love to engage with the commission specifically on your design guidance for this particular element.
Thank you, Diana. I think as I've learned more about this project and the fact that it's connecting two medical facilities, it seems to make sense too, but I really do applaud the commissioner comments about making this as beautiful and elegant as we can. All right, I don't see any other commissioner hands. Christina, should we see if there's public comment?
That's At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raised hand function, and 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so I will close the public testimony period.
Thanks, Christina. All right,
Good.
commissioners, you've had a good debate. And
I'd like to
love
make a motion,
Thanks,
Linda.
Mimi.
I'd like to make a motion to move to subcommittee and if it's possible to expedite the review process. In terms of having it come back sooner, that would be appreciated, I'm sure. But I do think focusing on design excellence with the proponent team would be advisable.
It sounds like it would be helpful for the commissioners who made comments on the proposal to see some process and different kinds of ways in which this team has looked at the bridge. If there's physical models, if there's, as you mentioned, plans, section, all of these things, just to give us a better sense of the character of this as a kind of urban insertion. So I think it would be great to see that in future subcommittee meetings.
By the way, we do have 3D prints of the bridge,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
think, you know, like anything, these things are wonderful. And we certainly have materials.
Yeah.
When you see them in the real, it
Yeah,
makes a
yeah.
difference in the context of the buildings and the bridge itself.
So even if at one of the subcommittees meetings, if it's remote or through Zoom, we've had proponents bring a camera and kind of walk around the model itself, and it is helpful. It sounds crazy, but it is helpful.
Yeah, we'll plan
but
to do
just
that.
to,
We'll plan
like,
so that can be engagement
think
with that as
so.
well.
And
Yeah.
then maybe the next time you see us, we are colleagues and friends. So if you can share with us the process, I'm sure that was extensive that you all went through. Because I think Bill brings up some real important comments about, we don't do this very often. And so I think it's an important conversation to have and make sure that this is the best design we can do. I don't know if there's a dispute about the importance of the bridge itself as a kind of connector, but I think the next question is, what does it look like?
Right.
So.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks, McYoung. Thank you, Joe. Commissioners, we have a motion on the table to move to subcommittee. Do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah.
Great. And all in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Evans,
Aye.
McYoung Kim,
Aye.
Bill Ron,
Aye.
Laura Solano,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley, and we have 3 recused. If you could just say recused. David Haseen,
Recused.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Recused.
and Kirk Sykes also is recused, but I think I saw that he signed out.
No, I'm here.
You're back. You're back.
No,
Kirk.
I just signed up from a different device. I am recused as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we will see you in subcommittee. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next project is 776 Summer Street, and both Mimi Love and Kirk Sykes are recused from this project. Do we have a presentation from the planning department to start us off?
We do. I'll be giving planning context for Amy tonight, and we'll flip it to the proponent, and then Seth will follow up with the design review feedback summary. So as I described at the top of the meeting, this proposal contemplates an amendment to the master plan for PDA 128, also known as 776 Summer Street Master Plan, or the Edison Street Power Plant Master Plan. And it also simultaneously contemplates a development plan for a 6.8 acre portion of the site, which we'll get into in greater detail. But first, just to orient ourselves here, you see in a thick black outline here in the center of the page, the 15.2 acre site of the master plan that was board approved in 2021. To the east of the site, the Conley Container Terminal, to the south of the site, in yellow, the South Boston residential area, to the west of the site, in purple, a waterfront manufacturing sub-district. Also across from the site, the Medal of Honor Park. Sort of central to the amendment proposed is a use swap. I'm using some air quotes here because swap's a very technical term, between Block C and Block A. moving residential uses to Block A and moving office and R&D uses to Block C, and then some related dimensional changes, which we'll also describe in some more detail. Staff recommend that the residential use option be preserved at Block C as an allowed use and simply add commercial use as an option for that block, and are supportive of residential uses at Block A. As it's adjacent to the Medal of Honor Park and some other existing open spaces. We feel that the adjacency to the MBTA station there could be mitigated in future approvals for the project. The planning study that was undertaken during the initial review of this project, the South Boston Edison Power Plant Planning Initiative, emphasized the significance of the intersection of First and Summer Streets. And we believe that the massing and floor plate changes that are driven by the proposed use change could be evaluated in a manner that considers this important city-making opportunity. Next slide, please. Also, to orient ourselves sort of in time in the long approvals for this project, this slide summarizes the approvals process to date, starting with the master plan, which was kicked off by that BPDA-led community engagement effort in 2017, reviewed by this commission through 2019 and 2020, culminating in a BPDA board approval in 2021. The Phase 1 development plan, which refined aspects of the proposed public realm and open space infrastructure, included terminating the M Street extension at Elkin Street and giving M Street right-of-way over north of Elkin Street over to a generous open space connection to the waterfront. That Phase 1 development plan was approved in 2023, and the proposed Phase 2 development plan does not contemplate any further changes to open space or public realm elements of the master plan. Next slide. And this is simply a summary of those related dimensional changes I referred to at the top, what is being proposed for the PDA amendment, and then where future ADB entitlements will be considered. The right-hand column and image demonstrates some of those changes, but staff are primarily supportive of the preservation of a proposed setback. And I think with that, I will let the proponent team take it over, and then we'll flip it over to Seth for a further discussion.
Thank you, Christina. Let's have Kate from Gensler please pull up the presentation. And we will go ahead and get started. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Melissa Schrock. I'm an EVP at HRP Group. As Christina just explained, we're here tonight to review our very recent Article 80C filing for the Phase 2 and a related master plan amendment. We will be filing our Article 80B document in early 2025, at which point we'll be back with you to review specific public realm and building design features. Tonight, we're really focused on proposed refinements to the uses on 2 of the blocks and zoning envelopes on 3 of the 4 blocks in Phase 2. Next. As some of you may remember, we received BCDC and BPDA approvals for the master plan PDA in January of 21. The development plan included 10 buildings, 6 new buildings at blocks A through F, and the preservation of 4 existing turbine halls. This was a strong plan, but as we began to design Phase 1, which was blocks D, F, and 3 of the turbine halls, we proposed certain refinements to improve the public realm experience. Next. Those refinements were captured in our Phase 1 PDA development plan, which was approved in January of 23. The plan still included the same 10 blocks, but we eliminated the private drive that extended to the waterfront and moved the small open space that was tucked between blocks A and F and frankly not really visible from the neighborhood into a consolidated and improved public open space leading from the extension of M Street down to the waterfront. This also allowed the new internal roadway to be straightened a bit, and we proposed rebuilding the seawall along the waterfront, helping to create a more accessible and usable waterfront promenade. Next. Our Phase 2 PDA development plan maintains all of those public realm refinements, but proposes to modify the uses at blocks A and C so that block C at the corner of Summer and East First Streets becomes a commercial building and block A across from Medal of Honor Park becomes a residential building. Next. here isolating just those phase 2 blocks, which will be the subject of our upcoming Article 80B filing. Victor?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Victor Paciotti, Architect and Design Director with Gensler, and we're going to start by talking a little bit about existing land uses. This aerial diagram illustrates the current land uses in the context of the project site and the approved land uses by block on the site itself, shown in the center of the page, bounded by the red outline. We'll focus specifically on land uses at blocks A and C in relation to the surrounding context. Block A, shown here as a commercial use, is located directly adjacent to Medal of Honor Park to the south, residential Block B to the west, and a neighborhood dog park which anchors the west end of the Thomas Butler Memorial Park, which is a linear parkway that provides access to the east to Pleasure Bay and Castle Island. Block C, shown here as residential, is completely encircled by commercial and industrial uses. Acoustical analysis has also shown that the intersection of Summer Street and East First Street is the loudest location on the project site. If we keep our eyes on blocks A and C and flip to the next slide, this is the illustration of the proposed land use swap to pair these blocks with their respective uses more harmoniously with the site context, which we believe yields better urban relationships and connections between the new development and the existing commercial, residential, and recreational context. Block C, now seen here as a commercial parcel, fits squarely into an existing commercial context, helping to define the commercial corridor along these blocks of Summer Street. Block A, now shown as residential, offers direct access to park amenities, transit, and creates a residential and pedestrian experience connecting neighborhoods to the south to the on-site amenities and waterfront promenade beyond. Next slide, please. The next couple slides share a series of images that'll further illustrate the urban context of blocks C and A and the unique conditions surrounding each. The images on this page are taken at the intersection of Summer Street and East First Street, offering a 360-degree look around facing north, south, east, and west. Note that industrial and commercial uses surround the site in its immediate context and beyond in all directions. Next slide. These images are taken from the intersection of M Street and East First Street. M Street runs between the Medal of Honor Park and residential townhomes, as seen in the upper left image. M Street currently terminates into East First Street, but with the new development at blocks A and B, will extend the neighborhood experience into the development as Thomas Edison Way, and then transition into plazas and the waterfront promenade. Other images on this page looking east and west along East First Street show the residential and recreational character of this side of the site. Next slide, please. Zooming into the Block A and C buildings, this diagram illustrates the massing of Block A as a commercial building. The block footprint at 200 feet by 210 feet and a height limit at 72 feet compromises the commercial development potential of the block, while the adjacency to existing green space and other multifamily residential suggests a missed opportunity to serve and enhance the residential experience. Next slide. The approved block C height is 198 feet, which through an urban design lens is tall relative to existing building heights along East First Street. Additionally, the overall site proportion and overlay of several higher level setbacks yields inefficient planning for residential floor plates and does not solve for the noise and commercial use adjacencies. And in a couple of slides, we'll see proposed changes to two of those upper level setbacks, one along Summer Street and the other along Turbine Alley. Next slide. So in the next few slides, we'll describe in more detail the land use swap and the related height redistribution proposed for the Phase 2 development plan. Next slide. The diagrams along the right side here illustrate proposed changes at Block C as a commercial block. The approved 198-foot height limit would be reduced to 160 feet, and the upper level setbacks parallel to Summer Street and Turbine Hall 3 would be vacated to allow for an efficient commercial building footprint. 3 other important site setbacks are maintained: 30 feet from the property line at Summer Street, 20 feet from the property line at East First Street, and an additional 50-foot upper level setback from the building facade along East First Street. Next slide. Building A, shown here in its proximity to park amenities and the existing residential context, it proposes a very modest 12-foot height increase from 72 feet to 84 feet, allowing for 1 additional level of residential units. The site dimension allows for a building form with a central second-floor terrace wrapped by housing on 3 sides. The 20-foot ground level setback on East First Street is maintained. Previously, residential use at Block A had posed concerns for Massport due to the proximity to the Conley terminal to the northeast. However, through extensive discussions and agreements that limit potential conflict between those uses, Massport has now approved residential use on Block A.
1 minute, Victor.
Thank you. Ongoing design work is responsive to those agreements. The building massing orients the end caps of the residential to the east, limiting openings and views. The unit quantity on this site is limited, and units will all be rental. Next slide, please. Building B proposes a small height increase from 26 feet to 84 feet to 110 feet only at the northern portion of the parcel away from East First Street. Ground level setbacks are maintained, as is the 72-foot height limit. Next slide. This is a summary of the land use swap and height redistribution. Block A and C land use are now appropriately responsive to their context. Blocks A and B see a modest height increase to accommodate the approved number of units. And Block C is reduced by 38 feet for a more even distribution of height along East First Street. Setbacks along East First Street at grade and the 50-foot setback at 72 feet is maintained. Last slide. So this slide illustrates a side-by-side comparison of the development plan evolution from 2021 to the present. And we welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Seth, I think you're going to share some urban design ideas.
Thank you, Linda. So quickly, turning Block A into residential provides an opportunity to create a critical mass of contiguous residential development in this portion of the site. Allowing for a mid-rise construction type for housing at Block A gives it a greater likelihood of realizing housing here. The concentration of residential away from the commercial corridor of Summer Street towards the predominantly residential First Street corridor, as well as the existing Medal of Honor Park and Dog Park on Cotterley Terminal, is a positive development from the city's point of view and places new residents closer to open space amenities as well as transit access. Next slide, please. Putting residential on Block A also shifts residential to abut Massport's Connolly Terminal. However, the portion of Connolly that Block A is adjacent to is actually a dog park as well as an MBTA bus terminal and station. Further afield from Block A is an emergency power substation serving the MBTA power and operation needs. To date, the proponent has conducted sound studies to better understand the impacts of bus vehicles, noise on this site. Further analyses will be conducted during the subsequent Article 80B processes. The city is working with the proponent to find every opportunity to enhance the physical buffering between Block A and the adjacent MBTA uses on the terminal, including on and off-site landscaping strategies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Seth. Appreciate it. Commissioners, we're almost up against 7:30. Mick Young, are we going to lose you?
Please don't arrange the whole evening around me. I'll comment when I can, so no worries. I'll just slip out when I have to.
All right.
Actually, Linda, I actually do have a call at 7:30, so if I could,
I was going
maybe,
to ask you and Mick Young first because I knew that both of you needed to leave early. So please go ahead, David.
thank you so much. First of all, thank you for that very clear and compelling presentation. Uh, at a first blush, I'm completely supportive of the use swap that you described. Makes total sense to me for a whole host of reasons. I am intrigued by Seth's alternative massing diagrams. I think that there is a massiveness actually to the massing of the swap of the sites that I'd like to be able to understand from eye-level views and more contextual information around what's across the street and how this ultimately plays out. The building on the corner, while I appreciate the low setback as it relates to the turbine hall, that's certainly important, but I think given the amount of articulation that we've seen in some of the other buildings that you've already presented to us, it would be interesting to know how we could expect these buildings to evolve, because right now they look a little heavy. So I would say that when you come back to subcommittee, if you could share with us some ideas about massing, in particular around the housing building, why you've oriented it the way you did, as opposed to some of the alternatives that Seth presented. But similarly, on the corner building, I can't remember the block that's in front of it, which has all the terracing and so forth. That's a very exciting piece of architecture that breaks down a very massive building. I'm curious to know how that might play out on this site. Right now, it doesn't appear to be of a kind, if you will, with that in a sense, what is that street wall ultimately going to look like, and what is the urban design plan for that street wall in, frankly, both directions. So, and also those views down the new street that cuts through the turbine hall, sort of understanding what those new masses will feel like as we're moving through those spaces. So that would be my request. But certainly, I think the land swap idea makes infinite sense. Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah,
David.
I think building on that, I agree with everything David said. It would be helpful to me when you come back to subcommittee, if you could kind of, I appreciated the kind of way in which you've shown each of the individual massings, but would love to see how things connect to each other. So when David talked about the wall, the kind of urban wall, how this fits into kind of the larger urban strategy, I think would be helpful to kind of just zoom out a little bit so that we could see a little bit more of that and how each of these different considerations and options are fit into this larger strategy. So I think that would be helpful. I think what's always really fascinating, but also concerning about a project like this is that you are sort of the first kids on the block. And so we want to make sure that we make a good imprint in this kind of first move.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I may respond quickly to those
Yeah.
comments, just a clarification. Each of the blocks, within weeks, literally, has had design teams brought on board to begin building design. So
Okay.
all that we are sharing tonight, which you've clearly recognized, are zoning envelopes and actually maximize zoning envelopes. So the questions are very well taken. You are not seeing and recognizing any building articulation as we're really just talking about the land swap usage between A and C. And as part of the Article 80B filing, we will be before you, I'm sure, quite a few times to share building massing, setbacks, and other evolutions. So you're responding wonderfully to this kind of clunky maximum zoning massing. That's all it is at this time.
Victor, thank you. I guess, Linda, I would ask, as we're canvassing as your, since I'm jumping off as your canvassing commissioners, my sense is that if we are here primarily to validate the idea of a swap of uses, and that we're going to be seeing the architecture later, and the character of the architecture later, whether we should not potentially say yes and and look forward to the development of the architecture, unless of course there are larger questions about the public realm and how that is been deployed on this site. But that's my 2 cents. So
Yeah, thank you,
thank
David. And I was going to follow up with that comment since Victor just explained it so well. Today, we're just looking at the zoning envelopes, and we'll come back for building articulation, open space articulation during the ADB process. But David and McYoung, I'm glad we got your voices in before you had to drop off. Thank you. Have a good night. Other commissioner comments about the project?
And just a note before any folks do, if any other commissioners need to drop off, could you please let us know before you do that, as we are at quorum.
Shauna, I see your hand, and then Bill.
And my comment was more a question regarding the use and zoning envelope. And I think David did summarize things very carefully. I appreciate the presentation. I believe, and maybe I misunderstood this, that at the introduction there was a suggestion that the building A become a hybrid of both resi and office. Is that correct? And if no, okay, so then I misunderstood Christina, and I was going to question that. Okay, then I don't have a comment at the moment.
Shauna, I think that was simply that the uses are going to be swapped, but that rather than eliminate the possibility of residential on the other site, we just simply add an commercial as an allowed use, commercial and R&D as an allowed use, rather than remove residential from that corner on the outside chance that a residential building comes back into play on that site.
Okay, thanks for the clarification, Christina. That makes sense.
Thank you, Shauna. Bill, and then Jonathan.
My comment is only in response to what David and McYoung had talked about, just to kind of understand the situation. Since David's comment about the massing of particularly site C strikes me as a valid question. Can Victor, can you share with us for buildings C, B, and A, what the square footage is now, and then for those 2 buildings, 3 buildings, in what you presented with the swap, what their intention is to be?
Yeah, if I could ask Kate to bring up the presentation again. And I believe in one of the upfront diagrams. Yes, thank you. So in this particular diagram, there's an area chart in the upper left-hand corner. We've split out phase 1 and phase 2 as the phase 1 projects have had a prior approval. You can see the square footages in GFA listed under phase 2, 185,000 for block A residential. Bill, that is capped at between 200 and 220 units. So there's really a unit cap there per the agreement with Massport. Block B, capped at 200,000 units. And then there you see at C, 350,000 max GFA for the R&D office building.
And
Bill, did I understand that your question was what's the delta between what we're seeing today and what we've approved in the past for phase 2?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
could you explain the delta between the square footages?
Victor.
Yeah, Kate, do we have our comparison chart in this presentation? I won't
You
be
can
able
just
to
go
do it
back
from
one
memory.
side. Go back to the phase 1 approval.
Thank you. So we don't have the side by side here, but to reference those blocks again, the 160 GFA on block A compares to, believe it was 185.5 at this juncture. Block B from 150 to 200. And then at block C, you see 380 down to 350.
Okay.
Kate, thank you for the side by side.
I
There we
mean,
go.
yep. That answers my question. I'm recognizing that, of course, the commercial building is going to have different floor-to-floor heights and all of that. But just trying to understand the issue of the trade, as it were.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for the real-time chart update. Appreciate that. Commissioners, other comments?
Well, I will let
Oh,
me
go ahead, Bill.
with what's interesting is block C changes from, actually gets a little smaller than it was, although the floor-to-floor heights are radically different. But the girth of the building, shall we say, from an urban, to use an urban design term, the girth of the building has suddenly gotten very bulgy, and David brought that up, and I think we should ask you all about that, because I think I'll speak for myself. I've long thought this was a really excellent project, and I thought the handling of it all the way through from 2021 and 2023 was very reassuring and exciting. No question about it. I think it's a fine project, and so block C now in this drawing looks heftier, has a wider girth, and has lost some of this. And I realize that can be corrected architecturally, perhaps, but I would comment on that. And
Since that's come up from two commissioners, can we toggle back and forth between the former plan on block C and the proposed plan on block C? And if it's kind of a three-dimensional toggle, that would be ideal.
Thank you. While we're doing that, just to address what's a great comment and discussion. Our team has been privileged, in addition to be the master plan architect, also be selected as the block C designers. So to foreshadow a bit, we are in the process and concur that if block C was an extrusion in its current form, it would not meet the urban design goals that we're articulating here. So we have just begun, we're 3 or 4 weeks into the process of beginning to work on that mass through a process of sculpting. Now, it will, as you're noting, Bill, be a wider building than had it been residential.
Right.
But rest assured that that sort of sculpting through the lens that you all are talking about is underway, and we're looking forward to bringing that before the commission.
Thank you.
All right, so we're seeing that toggle here and then the next slide, is that right?
Yep.
And then here. Thank you. Shauna, I think I saw your hand.
I forgot to lower it. Sorry.
Okay.
I had a brief comment, kind of similar to that, the spirit around sort of sculpting, looking at block A. I think there's a comment around the additional height would allow for an additional floor of residential. I'm curious what are opportunities to sculpt that? And I think, once you've kind of already crossed that threshold into high rise, if you will, I mean, does more latitude on the height allowance allow for more opportunity to sculpt the building. I think one of the concerns with, projects of this type is they do kind of end up looking kind of blocky, just because of the nature and the demands of residential work. So just curious, if there's enough capacity within this request for to go to 84 to sculpt the building, if you will.
Again, I just respectfully, the presentation tonight is very much about the land use swap. And we can carry these comments back to the design teams that have been awarded the design of each block. But to be sure, the design of Block A is just beginning its journey. So you're not seeing sculpting or form making in this particular diagram. It's just a zoning diagram.
No, yeah, no, I get that. I guess my point is that is there enough latitude in going from 72 to 84 to get the kind of sculpting that you think you'll want to do here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Commissioner Evans, if I can jump in, because Victor isn't necessarily privy to all of the updates from the various design teams that are working on different blocks. So that is definitely something that the design team of Block A is considering, and how to break down the mass of the Block A as well from different perspectives, from different orientations as you approach it from different directions, and how it could potentially look like more than one building, those sorts of things. So that is definitely something that team is taking into account. And all of this, and I'm sorry if we keep punting, but it's, very isolated amount of information that's in the Article 80C filing. All of this will be in the 80B filing that's forthcoming, when we'll be coming back to full commission and then to subcommittee to review the design of each block and its associated public realm.
No.
Thank you, and thanks for your question, Jonathan. Yeah, I think we understand it's early days. I'll add just a few comments. The first one, and this is a good slide to look at, in addition to kind of the massing of Block C, I'm also wondering if you've had conversations about kind of stepping back on Summer Street on that block. I know that the focus has been on East First Street and to kind of maintain that podium height, but I'd also be curious about the step back on Summer Street. It just feels very bulky, as others have said, and very sheer there. And then the second comment that I wanted to add was on Block A. And I also liked the alternatives that Seth had presented at the beginning, particularly the one where that residential would open up onto the Medal of Honor Park to the south. And I also wanted to just add that I think it would be a really interesting exercise to have it not only open up to the south, but open up at street level. I think what's shown right now is that there's a podium on that building too, although it's a little hard to see here. But if that's been explored as well.
I can thank you, Linda. I can speak to your questions or comment on Block C, because we are privy to that design process.
Right.
So again, it's a little bit of foreshadowing, but we are certainly looking at sculpting along Summer Street, as well as other facades. So do not anticipate that to be an extrusion, the full height of that building. And we're looking forward to sharing that. But most definitely, we are looking at that particular street wall and easing some of the massing characteristics that you all are noticing in this zoning model, for sure.
Okay. Thanks for that sneak peek.
And Linda, I just wanted to add one comment following up on Mick Young's earlier comment, as well as Jonathan's comment, that well, be it on different sides of the street, the relationship between B and A is an interesting massing relationship that we'll want to look at. And I think that's part of what may have been genesis for Jonathan's comment that there is sort of such a sort of elegant sculptural massing starting with B, and for A, for the language and correspondence, not mimicking, but clear relationship between those two buildings.
Yeah, thank you, Shauna. And I just wanted to follow up on my earlier question about Block A, and then I had one more comment about open space.
Yeah, Commissioner Easley, that is a podium in the center. So just to be, just maybe you remember this, maybe you don't, but there is parking beneath this Block A, which will be accessed off of the service drive that's between Block F and Block A. So there's a loading entrance there. None of that's on the public streets, but it's off of the service drive, you know, in that area, like I mentioned, between F and A. But there's loading and there's parking access. So there is a ground floor, and then we're anticipating more active uses on the street sides that you would see from East First Street and that you would see from Thomas Edison Way. Those diagrams that Seth shared were actually prepared by us. We have looked at different orientations. One thing that I do want to point out, just so commissioners are aware of some of the context within which we are working, is Massport has design review approval over this building and this building only, Block A. They have agreed to residential use on this site through multiple conversations, as Victor mentioned, with some parameters around what we can do on this site. Number one, number two, it can be between 200 and 200 units maximum. We can't go above that, which is part of the reason that the building is shown only to 84 feet, right? Because additional height doesn't actually get us anything. We can't use it. We can't fit any more units in the building. Sculpting it is very much, top of mind with the design team, but the orientation also is trying to be thoughtful and sensitive to the requirements that Massport put on us, where they want to make sure that we're not creating a situation where there's conflict between residential uses and what's going on with the port. Additionally, the land immediately to the east of us is actually the MBTA parcel that's there. There's the bus terminal, the City Point bus terminal, which is great because that provides transit access. But behind that, and Seth had one of our diagrams in there as well, there's also an emergency power station that they use from time to time. And so they also have concerns about how to mitigate some of this adjacencies. And that's one of the reasons that we've shown the building oriented this way, with the two short sides of the residential bars facing that way. And that way, the majority of the units don't see the port. They're not exposed to the MBTA parcel, and we're not creating those conflicts.
Got it. That's really helpful. And then my last question is not necessarily to answer for today, but I just think that having Block A next to Block B and then associated with the residential on the other side of East First Street makes a lot of sense to me. And then also the idea that you've got park space essentially to the north on the waterfront, and the way that ribbons through to not only the dog park, but the Medal of Honor Park, and then all the way to Moakley. And I would just make the comment that I would love to see that really strong green ribbon continue as Block A changes its use, and maybe even get strengthened to the east to connect to some of those pieces. And I understand there's an industrial use ribbon that separates you, but I still think there could be an overture there. Thank you. Commissioners, other comments?
And if I could just jump in for a second to sort of reiterate in Block A, with the dimensional controls, right, with the zoning envelopes that the proponent is proposing, right, we're not necessarily mandating which side the courtyard is on or how the building is actually shaped around that is something that we'd be looking at, in much more detail in Article 80B, and have the opportunity, I think, to really see that in the context of the development of the architecture, to see if it's, the right orientation and successfully done.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I think we're just testing it out in our minds during this meeting as well.
Yep.
Christina, I don't see any more commissioner hands. Is there any public comment?
I will solicit public comment, but also just want to flag for commissioners that we did receive one written testimony that I submitted with materials sent in your pre-flight package. Okay, so at this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raised hand function, and dial 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised. So I will close public testimony.
Thanks, Christina. So commissioners, we're voting on a parcel swap and very broad zoning envelopes today. Do we have a motion? I see a lot of thoughtful faces.
I motion
Thank you, Jonathan.
Motion to approve. This doesn't seem like something that warrants significant conversation in subcommittee. I think we know we have each project to look at. So I'm okay to David's point earlier.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan.
That's my motion. Yeah, sorry.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Laura. All in favor, please say yes. Jonathan, oh, go ahead, Bill. I didn't see your hand there.
Can I offer a slight amendment to Jonathan's motion, which is to accept his motion as the first sentence and say we are concerned that the shaping of the building in parcel C is the shaping of the parcel C in preliminary drawings is a concern to us, and we would ask that other shapings of that building be presented when the architectural drawings are presented, or something to that effect.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I think it's kind of the sculpting of the massing in building C, I think, was the concern from several commissioners.
Yes.
Jonathan, would you like to try to restate that motion?
Oh, that's Bill's job.
Actually, can I, Linda, since I was taking notes?
Yes, thanks, Christina.
A motion to approve that additional planning department review should focus on shaping of parcel C, and that its special attention from this commission will be given to the effort in further approval processes.
That was beautifully done. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. All in favor, please say yes. Jonathan Evans?
Yes.
Shauna Gilly-Smith?
Yes.
Bill Ron?
Yes.
Laura Solano?
Yes.
And myself, Linda Eastley, and then we have 2 recused members. If you could state recused when I call your name. Mimi Love?
Recused.
And Kirk Sykes.
Recused.
Thank you all.
Sorry, recused. Sorry.
No, we heard you. Thank you, Kirk. All right, so the project is approved to move on to the next step. Thank you for a great presentation today.
Thank you, commissioners. Very much
forward
appreciated.
to coming back and sharing the designs of the buildings with you, the public.
We are too. We are too. It's been fun to follow this project. And the last item of business is to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second.
Second.
And all in favor, please say yes. Jonathan Evans?
Yes.
Shauna Gilly-Smith?
Yes.
Bill Ron?
Yes.
Laura Solano?
Yes.
Kirk Sykes?
Yes.
Mimi Love?
Yes.
And myself, Linda Eastley. We are adjourned. Nice to see everyone. Have a good night.
Take care. Good job.
Thank
Thank you.